Today, Israel and the Palestinians living in Gaza are engaged in their fiercest fighting in 4 years. Israel has continued to air strikes while missiles from Gaza reached a Tel Aviv suburb. At least 15 Palestinians and 3 Israelis have been killed in just the past 24 hours, and 3 Israeli soldiers were reportedly injured by Hamas rockets. NBC's Martin Fletcher joins us from Tel Aviv, and Ayman Mohyeldin is in Gaza. Martin, first to you. Did this start with the assassination or with Israel taking down the Hamas leader, or was there already activity coming from Gaza into Israel?
No, there was already activity. There's always been a low level of violence, and we start reporting, of course, when it reaches a peak. But there was an attack about 10 days ago when the Palestinians fired a missile into an Israeli army jeep, seriously wounding 4 soldiers. That really began to be the signal to the Israelis that a red line was being broached. And then, of course, right before the assassination, the Palestinians fired about 100 rockets from Gaza over a period of 5 days into Israel. And at a certain point, Israel said, the rules are changing, we have to re-establish control, and they struck and they assassinated, of course, in a major success for Israel, the military leader of Hamas.
And Ayman, tell us what's happening in Gaza right now, because we have continued firing. Where are the rockets coming from? And we know that Iron Dome has protected Israel from many of them hitting, but what is the situation, and also the departure of the UN workers today from Gaza?
Well, Andrea, it's Thursday night. These streets would usually be bustling. They're not. People in Gaza, the 1.5 million people, very much concerned. There's a great sense of anxiety and tension in the air here. People are very much worried about the ongoing operation. There's no doubt from the perspective of the Palestinians, this could possibly escalate even further. They saw 4 years ago that it began with an airstrikes, if you will, but fully escalated into a ground invasion. Many people here are bracing themselves for that, and that is what many of the Palestinians that we've been speaking to say they fear the most. Gaza is in no condition to withstand that kind of invasion. The hospitals that we've been speaking to and others say they've also been stretched to the capacity as a result of the aerial strikes over the past several days. As you mentioned, many civilians killed, as well as nearly 200 Palestinians injured in that fighting. As you mentioned as well, the aid workers, the international workers from the United Nations and others, many of them have evacuated. On our way into Gaza, we saw about 3 or 4 dozen of them leaving. It was also an ominous sign that perhaps the situation here is only going to get worse before it gets better.
Martin, you're such a veteran, as is Ayman, of the region. You've seen these crises develop. What is your feel for what the potential here is for this getting out of control?
Well, yeah, I think the fear that Ayman just expressed about the people, among the people, the Palestinians in Gaza, fear about an Israeli ground invasion, it does seem quite a realistic possibility. Yesterday, I personally would have said it wasn't very likely. Today, it seems more likely. The Israeli army is poised on the edge of Gaza. They've called up reserves. Tanks and armored cars are streaming down towards the border. The Israeli leaders today were saying that they want to do everything. El Barak, the defense minister, said, there's more or less a quote, he said, we will do anything, and he emphasized, repeated, he said, we will do anything, and I repeat, anything, to make the south of Israel secure. And the sense of that is a ground invasion could be the major card that Israel still has to play. But Israel certainly would dearly like to stop those rocket attacks from the air, from its attacks from the air and from the sea, by the way, by destroying the Hamas stockpile of long-range weapons. That's what Israel wants to do. But of course, this evening, we saw how, although Israel says they've destroyed most of those weapons, nevertheless, for the first time, there were 2 long-range rockets fired from Gaza towards Tel Aviv area. For the first time, sirens sounded in Tel Aviv, here behind me, this evening. The 2 rockets fell harmlessly very close in fields near Tel Aviv. But although Israel's trying to destroy that threat and said they'll do anything to destroy the threat is still real. So yes, a ground invasion, I would say, is a very legitimate fear among Palestinians. It could happen.
And of course, Ayman, this happens in the context of no ongoing negotiations, no peace framework. Nothing has happened on the Israeli-Palestinians front. The Palestinians, frustrated, have gone to the United Nations General Assembly for some sort of informal or symbolic status, having a year ago lost their bid for some kind of statehood to be declared by the Security Council. So what happens next from that perspective?
Well, first of all, from a Palestinian perspective, both Fatah and Hamas, the two major Palestinian factions, have been at odds for several years. They've been unable to reconcile their differences and put together a united Palestinian front on how to deal with the ongoing crisis. There is a very loud debate within Palestinian society as to whether these types of rocket attacks or armed resistance is advancing the Palestinian cause. On one hand, they look at what's going on in the West Bank. They see expansion of Israeli settlements, very little progress taking place on the negotiations front there. They say that is not working. Those that subscribe to the two-state solution through negotiations, that has failed. And the others are looking what is happening in Gaza and the humanitarian situation that the armed resistance, as they call it here, has brought for them. And they say that is not working. So there's a great sense of frustration among Palestinians, a great sense of frustration towards the United States, which is supposed to be working on brokering this type of agreement, and more importantly, a great disappointment with the international community that more is not being done to advance peace negotiations between them. It was one of the stated goals of President Obama when he came into office 4 years after the end of his first term. Very little to show that any kind of progress has been made on that front, Andrea.
In fact, progress has been lost, and there's now real concerns about the peace treaty, which has been the central core, the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, which has been the core of all peace in the Middle East, that is also at risk. Martin, Fletcher, Ayman Mohyeldin, both of you, thank you so very much.